Good evening, everybody. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library. As we begin tonight, I want to take a minute to acknowledge that we're on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, these are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people, and we honor their elders past, present, and future, and thank them for their stewardship of the land. Welcome to tonight's program with Angela Garbes, Katrina Spade, and Molly Wizenberg, presented with our friends from Elliott Bay Book Company. I have a couple quick announcements before we get started. First, I wanted to take a minute to thank our series sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation and the Seattle Times, for their generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors like you help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. So for library donors with us tonight, thank you so much for your support. I also wanted to mention we have assistive listening technology available on the table there, right actually by where Angela is standing, Vanna there. So if you find that you need that, you can pop down and grab one of those, or you can give me a little wave and I'll bring one to you. And tonight is the second in our fall guest curator series, which invites local luminaries to curate programs here at the library. I was delighted when I talked to Angela last year, I think. Wow, a year ago, about being our fall curator. And she's put together just the best series, Midlife, Private Parts in Public, right? Yeah. 3 programs that explore female middle age, which is a decades-long period of transformation that almost never gets discussed publicly. So Angela's super fancy. I'm not going to read her whole bio, but you know that she's super fancy. She's written some really awesome, important books like Essential Labor, Mothering a Social Change, and her book Like a Mother. And she also is best friends with Trevor Noah and and the folks over at Fresh Air. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about the series now. Please help me welcome Angela Garbes.
Hi, I'm so glad you're all here. I'm kind of obsessed with how many of you are here, and it's just really beautiful to see all of your faces. Also, I just, want to acknowledge that it would be really easy to stay home tonight. I don't know, if that would be the best thing for mental health. For me, it's wonderful to be in community, but I just want to say that it's, it's a heavy moment. So I want to thank Stesha for inviting me to do whatever I wanted with this series. And I was like, I want to have a book group style thing. Is that allowed? And she was like, you can do literally whatever you want. So to be given that kind of freedom doesn't happen very often. So I'm going to introduce our speakers and the people who are leading us tonight in a minute. But on the note of, just where we are, I wanted to read something just to sort of ground us, because that's what I need. I don't actually have words yet for how I feel about what's going on in our country, but I know how to find words in books, and this is Let This Radicalize You by Kelly Hayes and Mariam Kaba. In a world where we are steadily being splintered apart, where so much of our social lives have been reduced to commercial interactions, where fellowship and belonging are desperately lacking, we must relearn how to hold space and belief together in ways that anchor us to each other and to our collective moral commitments. This is not simply a task of educating ourselves, but the ongoing work of charting and experiencing reality together and sharing our joy and grief over the wonders and tragedies of our times. Our atomized and alienated society leaves little organic space for political communion or even shared compassion. And in the spaces between us, fear grows. In order to overcome these impediments, organizers must work to construct anchors. I think of all of you as organizers, by the way, that can provide a coherent understanding of the world in catastrophic times and help people maintain their values and commitments. If we do not take the work of anchoring seriously, we may find that our ships scatter or even sink with every strong gust of wind. Anchors can take numerous shapes: a story, a community space, a sense of fellowship, a memorial. Anything that helps ground people in a shared sense of history, compassion, and purpose. Projects and actions that anchor us awaken compassion, enliven our connectedness, reinforce our values, and when necessary, reorient our political focus. We will need many such efforts in the coming years as people's values are increasingly imperiled by the further normalization of mass suffering and death, and collective memory is continuously whitewashed by the powerful. Fundamentally, people who have been conditioned out of fear to view their own interests in isolation rather than find strength in collectivity must learn to anchor themselves to one another for the sake of survival. Commitment itself is an important anchor. When it comes to resisting the propagation of harmful ideas or cooperation with harmful actions, an existing declared commitment that runs counter to the harmful idea or action at hand is one of the best defenses we have against persuasion. This is why commitments and affirmations should play important roles in the development of spaces and practices that anchor people. We must be concrete in our commitments to one another, to humanity, and to the earth, and we must reaffirm those commitments regularly. So, thanks. But mostly, I just want to I was gonna make you turn to the person next to you and declare a commitment, but I think we could skip that. But do that in your heart, because I just want to say that by being here, to me, your being here is a commitment to use public institutions, to support public institutions, which will very much be under threat. It is a commitment to supporting local artists and creative people, including myself and Molly and Katrina. It is also a commitment to art, which will be more necessary than ever, but also will be easily forgotten. And very much it is a commitment to nuance. So I'm taking up time, so I'm just gonna go straight to this summer when I read All Fours, I was involved in like 8 different simultaneous text conversations about it. And so I was like, the people need to talk about this. Like it feels right. Like this is a book group discussion. Katrina and Molly are gonna lead you guys, but please participate. It really is gonna you guys are like the fuel that makes us take off. So when I was thinking about doing this series on midlife, Katrina Spade was probably the first person that I thought of to be part of it. I met Katrina maybe I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. We randomly judged a design contest, which I had no business being there. But I had known about her work. And so Katrina is definitely a visionary. She's literally a death care revolutionary. And when I think about our fear of midlife, it's a fear of death. And the work that Katrina does is so important about contextualizing death and honoring it and showing how it actually fuels life. And so she is the founder and CEO of a company called Recompose. She was instrumental in getting a law in Washington State where you can be composted, human remains can be composted. Earlier this week, I did my will, and I was able to say that I would like to be composted through Recompose. So I've actually since I met Katrina, I was like, she's so cool. I want to do something with her someday. And it took this long, but this is what we got to do together, and I'm so glad. And then our other leader guide this evening is Molly Wizenberg, who I'm sure many of you know. Molly, she is one of our best known Seattle writers. She basically invented food blogging. She won a James Beard Award for her blog Orangeette, and she's written 2 best-selling memoirs, A Homemade Life and Delancey. I got to know Molly, I feel like it was just before the pandemic. And it was really interesting to me because she was someone who was really well known for doing a certain type of writing and sort of being a certain person in the world and in the community. And what I was so impressed by was that she was at a place in her life where she realized that the story that she was telling, the story that was out there and that she was telling herself about herself didn't fit anymore. And as the years have passed, I've really come to admire it is just really hard to make a shift like that in your life personally, but also very much professionally. It can feel like you're risking a lot. But also, when I talked with her, I understood that it was also so necessary. And I feel like there's a freedom that she enacts now in her life that is really beautiful to see. And I think is whether or not it's directly tied to midlife, I think there's a transition there that we can all learn from. Yeah, so that's Katrina and Molly. I am so honored that they said yes to be like down to clown for an event like this. And yeah, I'm gonna let them take it from here and all of you as well. Thank you.
Great. That was so incredibly kind and expansive. Thank you, Angela. Here we are. Wow, yesterday morning I really did not feel like trying to put sentences together in front of a group of people, but I am always up for talking about books. So I'm thrilled to be here.
First, I'm going to test the mic. I did it. Hello. Yeah, Molly and I checked in, was it yesterday? And we were like, can we do this? And then we were like, of course we can, because what's better now tonight than to talk about things like raunchiness and perimenopause, that kind of good stuff, right?
And what it is to live in a body with a uterus
Thank you.
these days. Yeah, yeah. So, oh, I thought so too, Stasha.
I thought so.
Okay. Do you want to start us off? Katrina and I wanted to talk a little bit about what it is that made us really interested in talking about this book in this capacity. It intersects with our lives in so many ways, some of which overlap and some of which are individual to us. You want to start?
Sure. But should we talk about how the evening will go first, or are we going to jump right into that? Let's do it. Let's talk about us first.
Let's talk about us
Let's
first.
talk about us. Okay. Who are we? Why are we here? Yeah. So, I mean, boy, I love the book. I probably wouldn't be sitting here if I really didn't, I guess. Although I don't think Angela asked, did you like the book? Do you want to do this? Yes, I might have said, hell yeah, I want to do this event. But I do want to say right off the bat, two things. Number one, I've never been to a book club. So I'm making it up based on the movies.
I've never been to a book club where we actually talked about the book. So
Okay, right. That's right. We should all be drinking wine in our pajamas is what I think from the movies. But but also I just want to say I'm very pleased to be here in part because I've never gotten on a stage and talked about anything except for human composting. And and I'm pretty familiar with that and not at all familiar with any other topic on stage. So I'm like, okay. So if I get nervous, you'll hear me go like human composting because it'll just bring me right back to my comfortable place. The I'm a queer parent. I'm 47, first of all, which continues to astound me like, does anyone else feel that way when they say their own age to themselves? And they're like, I literally told someone the other day I was 37, completely believing it was true. Like, I wasn't doing a, great grandmother thing. I literally was just like, I'm 37. But I was like, no, I'm not. So I can't believe it. And I think it's really fun and fascinating to be midlife. I also had never applied that phrase to myself until Angela did a couple weeks ago. Thanks so much. No, but I like it actually, midlife, if we're lucky, right? It sounds nice. I'm a queer parent of two. My partner, Rania, and I have been together for a long time, for a quarter century.
Woo!
A little more than that. And we have two teenage sons who insist that they're straight, which is
That must be
deeply
so disappointing.
Like literally, we're like, well, we still love you. Like,
Mhm,
I was jealous when I heard what, yeah.
mhm.
Anyway, um, and then anyway, so having teenage men in the house, one of them is about to turn 20, which is another age where I'm just like, wait, what? How could that be? Is a very special thing, actually. And so those things that, raising children, having a long-term partner, being middle-aged, midlife, the book resonated for me in that way. And then the other thing I'll say, and then I'm going to pass it to Molly, is like, I found that there's a thread in the book about this sort of deep connection to work. And I don't consider myself an artist, but I do consider myself a creative person. And so I noticed really that resonated, this kind of obsession with work.
Mhm.
Um, and I often feel a little bit guilty about that obsession, but when I read it in terms of it being a creative pursuit, I didn't have judgment around it. And so I was like, oh, maybe I could lean into that a little more and not like judge myself for that and just be like, great, it's a creative pursuit.
Will you talk a little bit about what your work is? I mean, we heard a little bit about it from Angela, but I wanted you to talk a little bit more about what that work looks like on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I think that one of the things I'm proud of is that in creating Recompose, and more importantly, I think, well, not more importantly, more specifically in sort of coming up with the idea to compost humans and then getting through the many obstacles in order to do that legally and like safely and effectively, right? All the things you want when you're composting a human being. Um, but it was like, but the idea of it, being able, as you pointed this out the other night, thank you, which was like conceiving something and then bringing it to life,
Mhm.
and inventing something and then making it real and tangible is something that I find I get a lot of satisfaction from.
Mhm.
So you're all welcome to come take a tour of Recompose. We give tours all the time. You can sign up on the website. Human composting. And I'm gonna pass it to Molly now.
Okay. Um, so I'm 46, and I am also a queer parent. I'm on my second marriage, which is something I truly never thought that I would say. I think one of the saddest things to me about ending my first marriage was like, I really want to know what it's like to be in partnership with someone for that long. Anyway, hoping to do it this time. Um, yeah. I have a daughter who is 12, who is my biological child from my first marriage, which was to a cis man. He and I made a lot of things together. We both, I think we were drawn together out of a love of cooking and truly kind of a love of domesticity. And ultimately, we made two restaurants together, Delancey and Essex, which are both in Ballard. And then he also owns Dino's Tomato Pie, which was happening when we were splitting up. So I can't claim that one. Anyway, he and I co-parent 50-50, and really, wow, have done a lot to learn how to do that. And then I am now married to my spouse Ash, and we are about to celebrate our 5th anniversary, and we have an almost 2-year-old together who Ash carried and who's their biological child. So yeah, it has been I don't know. I wouldn't trade any of it, and none of it is where I thought I would be. So yeah. So anyway, I'm excited to be here talking with you about the things we're going to talk about. Would you like to tell everyone?
Thank you so much. So tonight's it's a book group, which if you've seen one on TV, you know they are where we've all read. Who's read this book? Who has not? Wait, no. Yes.
Wait.
Who's read it? Let me try again.
Okay, who's read it? Okay. Who hasn't read it? Okay, okay. Okay, we're going to try not to have any spoilers, but you've probably already read a lot about this book. I don't think anything we're going to say is going to like surprise you.
But I had like final page quote that I was going to read, and then Molly said, "No, that's not fair for the people who haven't read the book." So you're very lucky that Molly said that. Those of you who haven't read it, but you probably know whether you've read it or not that the book is about oh gosh, well, it's about midlife. And we're going to talk together. What we're going to do is we're going to bring up 3 topics.
Yes.
Okay. Perimenopause is the first. Yeah. What if we didn't talk about that?
I
That
know.
would be
What
so-
if that was like the one thing? So
We're-
tonight we're not going to talk about midlife. Now, go ahead.
Perimenopause is number 1. Number 2 is well, you can. It's two different titles. There's sex and bodies. Is one way you could think of it. I'm really fond of the term frankness, which you came up with. So sex and bodies and frankness. Okay. And the third is fantasy.
So the way this is going to work is Katrina and I have chosen a passage in a couple cases 2 short passages that to us really speak to the theme. We're going to talk a little bit about how it resonates with us after we read the passage, and then we are going to kick a question to you. And there will be 2 library staffers, I believe, who will have mics. So now that you know kind of what the 3 themes are that we're hoping to get to tonight, think about if there's one in particular that you really, really want to speak to. So, yeah. I mean, and of course, you're welcome to speak to as many as you want, but we will be keeping an eye on the clock and trying to keep things moving along.
Don't be offended if we cut anyone off. It is not personal, right?
It is personal. No, okay. So, all right, we're gonna start with perimenopause. Okay, so we've got a couple quotes here that we wanted to share from the book. So one is, a recurring character in the book is the protagonist's doctor, Dr. Mendoza. And this is a conversation that she, the protagonist, has with Dr. Mendoza. And this is from page 186 for anybody who's looking at the book, okay? I don't want to take estrogen out of vanity, but does it really keep your skin thick and moist? I asked Dr. Mendoza. And if so, what's the time frame on that? We had just gone over my hormone panel. I would start with 0.25 milligrams of estradiol bioidentical hormone cream twice a day and a progesterone pill at night. I hoped to be dewy, almost reborn in time for Davy's dance. Dr. Mendoza smiled. Vanity is a great motivator because you can see the outside of your body. But remember, the same changes are happening on the inside too. Your cartilage is drying out, just like your face.
I'm going to read a totally separate quote from page 262. This is, I just love it. It's when the protagonist is talking to Harris's new girlfriend late in the book. Perimenopause. Okay, wow, but I don't have hot flashes or anything. Okay, backing up. I think she says like, I want to talk to you about something. And she's like, what? Perimenopause. Okay, wow, but I don't have hot flashes or anything. Some people don't. What about, for the record, I did pause here, vaginal dryness? The uncomfortable silence that followed was the mother from which all uncomfortable silences are descended. Sorry, it's just my OBGYN. I'm trying to share the knowledge. Huh, because it almost seemed like you were asking how wet I get, like a big dick contest, but for women.
So this book Actually, I want you to start out talking because I had we had really different feelings about the representation of perimenopause in this book. So you go first.
Okay. I believe that this book is that perimenopause book. Like
Okay.
it is a perimenopause book.
In
I
what
feel
sense?
strongly that it is that. And then I realized it's because the bar is so low.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was like finishing it. Yes, this is about perimenopause. This book might as well be called Perimenopause. And I was like reinvestigating that question. And I was like, oh, right. Have you read many other books where they even mention the concept?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, um, but uh, I will eat it up. Like, talk to me about perimenopause. I'm asking all my friends who are older, especially what their experience has been. I don't know how many people are doing the same or they've experienced it already. So they are helping their younger friends understand things. I'm like, is this a hot flash? And I'm like, no, you're wearing long underwear right now. You're just hot. Like, probably not actually a hot flash. But I do feel like, well, I love the quote you read because in a lot of ways, I've been feeling like I'm getting ready for a big match. I don't have hot flashes quite yet. I don't seem to have symptoms that I need to or want to get hormonal treatment for yet. But I'm like, I'll be ready. Like thanks in part to this page in the book that we read, I'll be ready. And I feel like I'm kind of like limbering up for that fight with my doctor, which is awful that I feel like I have to do that. I have, for the record, a very midlife um, um, PCP who, when she talks to me about perimenopause, just acts like she's never heard of it before.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's not unpleasant about it. She's just kind of like, oh yeah. And I'm just like, what is that the best we can do? So I will share a story unbidden about my partner Rania because we've been together for so long that I'm sure it's fine to share. But I would say I would I would say that the page in the book, that quote you read, I feel like it gave you directly the power and agency to go to your doctor and be like, I want this and I want it now. I mean, again, that's great. I'm psyched that that happens with this book, but also what a shame, what a terrible shame that we like need this page that's half in jest, to bring to our PCPs. But it worked. Ronnie has got all the good stuff. Just got all of the things.
I'm a little older than Katrina, already fully in perimenopause, perhaps shading into menopause. And I had talked to my doctor, who again is an older woman, knows so many things. And she was really like, I don't know, the breast cancer study, you probably shouldn't do it. And I was like, I really think it would be good. And having a medical professional represented who was just like, yes, get it, do it. You should have this. Um, I talked to so many more people, including a family member who's a doctor, and she was like, that study, it's problematic. There's like so much new information. And I just really went back to my doctor and I was like, no, I think it's really time. And she was like, okay. So I don't know, I felt very inspiring for me.
Well, so I love your sort of guarded endorsement of the book as a perimenopause book, because my feeling was, and I've talked with a couple of friends who are about a decade older than me about this. They felt very frustrated, like this narrator is sort of like kind of peering down like an abyss that she sees sort of on the horizon, but she's not there yet. Um, or that there was no depiction of, I guess, sort of the difficult bodily experiences of perimenopause in this book, which, yeah, I felt very aware of. I felt like she was doing a lot of sort of worrying about perimenopause, like as though that could hold it off, like the preoccupation with the cliff, the chart of estradiol. But at the same time, I feel like having to talk with you about this book and having to try to have something coherent to say has made me rethink that a little bit. And I find myself appreciating more the fact that even though this narrator is very worried about what is coming, at the same time, what she presents is a perimenopause that is more gain than loss. Like, I think everything about the book that is this wild sexual journey she's on, I think that too is perimenopause. And I think that when I didn't recognize that at first, I think it's because I'm thinking only of the dominant narrative that is, it is a loss. It is that there is no gain to it. Whereas I think the book really portrays the way that aging gives us an opportunity to maybe because we have fewer fucks to give, or because we no longer are like trying to get out and breed or whatever it is that our biology wants us to do. I think there's such an opportunity for reinvention of sex, for expansion of what sex is, and not just because of vaginal dryness, but because you can. Anyway, you wanna kick the question out?
I'm going to kick it to the audience. Okay, so now here's the question for all of you out there. In what way do you feel or not that the book is contributing to the conversation around perimenopause? They're all waiting for the frankness one. Because we said,
Yeah, no, the frankness
about-
one
Yay, thank
is
you.
the fun one.
You got it. So with this book, I felt very much aligned with Molly that it was perhaps trying to mirror the monsterization of menopause and perimenopause, and how it's like maybe the second uh, curse of our like sex, you know, and like again something that I think is coming up more um, in this generation's conversation around menopause is that it maybe has become exaggerated, or that it's been conflated with just what is aging, right? That it's not the curse of our sex, right? And the conflation that it is the other late term burden of being a person with a uterus. Like, I just felt like the protagonist was really leaning into that anxiety, that fear, that feeling of something being taken from you, like the one edge that we have in society, this like fertility, the beauty, the dew, and that being taken away. I again was like wondering if this is just feeding into the idea that it's menopause versus what is aging.
I love that you're knitting, by the way.
We have a question over here. Tyler's bringing a mic.
I felt like one of the contributions that I got like to that greater conversation was her talk about an approach to like sort of being invisible as a middle-aged woman and what that feels like, and then the transformation she has when she starts to be like, I was wrong. It looks beautiful up there, and I see how lovely it is and the value of it, and like her approach to Audra and how it changes and how it really shifts her thinking. And that was just so lovely to see that, because I feel like that sisterhood or whatever's going on with like sort of like aging into something and discovering respect and appreciation for the people who came before you was like, yeah, that's part of the conversation that I want to see and I liked.
Yeah, up there in the back.
I'm going to bring you a mic. Getting my steps in. Let's sneak by you.
Yes. Boobs.
Hello. Okay. So I think the word that comes to me, I keep thinking of the word permission. Like this permission to have a conversation, the permission to have different experiences, and the permission for it to be lovely and like wisdom gathering and connective and intergenerational. So yeah, that's just the word that I think of when I think of this conversation.
Thank you. Down in the third row here, second row.
Tyler will bring you a mic.
Thank you for bearing with the mics, everybody. We're trying to capture this for the library's YouTube page.
Oh.
So.
Uh-oh. Now there's pressure.
Oh God, sorry, I should have said that aloud. Oh no.
So I'm going to say first, I am a doctor. I appreciate that you had that conversation with your doctor and were empowered by this book to have that conversation with your doctor. And I am a doctor who will absolutely be on hormone replacement therapy when the time comes. So that's one thing that this book is already doing, right? It's a National Book Awards finalist about perimenopause. Huge, right? Again, this is a word that is entering the national lexicon all of a sudden. So these are things that the book's doing. Something about the book that I really appreciated was when she starts kind of like crowdsourcing with her elders. Again, thinking about like the liberation that comes with change and how that was like an aha moment, that all of a sudden it's not a cliff, it's a jumping off point. It's an opportunity for growth that comes with change. And that, I think, was what I really took home. And I mean, there was a lot that I connected with this book, but that was something that I really appreciated.
What you're saying reminds me of, or it makes me think of conversations that I've had recently with women who have children who are about to go off to college, and they are also in like biological perimenopause, and they've all expressed, like separately, none of these women know each other, but they've all expressed that like they're really going to be evaluating whether they will stay with their spouses after their children leave. And yes, I mean, I think this is very common, right? But I think that this is all part of, sorry, I'm setting a very bad example up here. But I think that this is all part and parcel of the same thing, this sense of possibility when other possibilities are taken off the table. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'll pass this.
Thanks. I was gonna talk about that same portion of it where she's interviewing all of her friends, and we're in a book group together, and we actually do talk about the books usually. And we talked about how that part, it sort of shifted into like almost a nonfiction like research study. And so I think it contributed so much to the conversation on perimenopause, and just really love that part. I think that part should be sort of sold separately too. And it just opened up like a wonderful conversation in our book group. And so I think like it helps facilitate those kinds of conversations too. Mm-hmm. And I keep also, after I read it, I read What the Fresh Hell Is This? And I just want to make a plug for that too. Now they're together in my mind too.
Will you say the title again?
What the Fresh Hell Is This?
Thanks.
It's a really amazing book about menopause and perimenopause.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to move on to the next question. I'm sure we could talk about perimenopause for another few hours. I did want to let everyone know that this is a library where you can spend time after this talk. If you want to talk with your neighbor later, you can do that. I don't know what time you close. There you go. Okay. So this conversation doesn't have to end when we get off the stage is what I'm trying to say here. But we're going to turn now to another theme in the book, which is frankness. It's possible that you noticed as you were reading the book that the author is quite frank with several topics, specifically sex, bodies, masturbation, queerness. I think that covers many of the topics right there. And so I'm going to read a quote first, and then Molly's going to read a quote. And then we're going to talk a little bit about those topics. This one is from page 207.
Will you set up what the context is?
Yes. The narrator is with Audra for the first, I guess, and only time. And they've just started having a frank conversation on the bed, if you know what I mean. And okay, I have a really ridiculous question right now that I should know the answer to. Do we know the narrator's name?
No.
Okay, because I keep being like the protagonist, the narrator. We don't know.
No, we don't know.
Okay, great. So I'll keep doing that then. The narrator is lying on the bed and is beginning to masturbate. So here's a quote. It's page 207. At first, I jerked off presentably, the way I thought other women masturbated. But ultimately, I gave up, tensed my body into an ugly rigor mortis, and let my hand go frantic.
It's so real. It's so real. The passage that I wanted to read comes just a few pages after that. So that was page 207. And then this is a longer passage. This is from pages 210 to 212. So she's just left Audra. And it's nighttime. She's alone and she's thinking. I walked with giant strides and marveled, almost laughing, that I'd actually had sex with someone, and it was the woman from the antique mall who wasn't even my type. I sashayed down the middle of the street. With the moon and almost ball above me, I scanned the lit windows, hoping someone might witness me out here alone and so free. Was this the secret to everything? This bodily freedom? It felt intuitive and healthy, as if promiscuity was my birthright as a woman. Maybe it was. Was this the skeleton in civilization's closet? The reason why men had come down so hard on us since the start of time? It suddenly seemed natural and sweet to fuck all my friends. What better way to understand other people's realities? 45 minutes later, I was still walking. I no longer wanted to fuck everyone in the world. That was lunacy. Ha ha. Now I wanted to eat the world like a giant fruit. I wanted to go to other countries, yes, but also, how come when I dropped Sam off at school, I always hurried home, even when there was no urgency? What was keeping me from taking a different exit? A person with a journeying, experimental soul should be living a life that allowed for it. The past wasn't my fault. Of course, I had been using prefab structures, not knowing any better. But I was older and could see my path clearly, extending from tonight and ending when I died. As I came down to earth, I wondered if I'd misunderstood the fork in the road Mary had been talking about. I'd thought the two paths were sex with Davy versus a life of bitterness and regret. But maybe the road split between a life spent longing versus a life that was continually surprising. I felt untethered from my age and femininity, and thus swimming in great new swaths of freedom and time. One might shift again and again like this, through intimacies, and not outpace oldness exactly, but match its weirdness, its flagrant specificity with one's own. Well, I want to start out talking about this because I really there was so much about this passage. in particular, the idea of a life spent longing versus a life that was continually surprising, um, that felt so personally targeted to me. I feel I am someone who I think lived in a prefab structure for a long time, and not because I knew I was living in a prefab structure. I just think that heterosexuality was easy and it fit me, and um, and I don't only like women or non-binary people, so it's much easier to be married to a man in so many ways than it is to be married to my non-binary spouse, not within our relationship, but outside of our relationship. We're about to shell out to have me legally adopt our son, even though I'm on the birth certificate, just like Ash is, because it is so much more perilous to be married when neither of you has a penis. Um, and it is so much harder to be sure of one's rights. So, for me, choosing to or noticing that I was in a prefab structure was something that felt really shameful to me. I felt really ashamed that I had gotten myself into this position, and that I felt somehow that I had been closeted even from myself. Um, and I don't feel shame about that anymore. But the imperative to find a different structure to live within, um, it felt, there was a period of time when it felt like either I'm going to find a way to have sex with this person who's not my husband, or it's going to be a life of bitterness and regret. But ultimately, um, it did come down to the bigger, more expansive fork, a life spent longing versus a life that was continually surprising. And yeah. So I want to say that I really appreciated, especially as someone who, so when I was in my first same-sex relationship, um, the person who I was dating told me that I was doing queer sex wrong, and that there were rules. She told me we couldn't just strip each other's clothes off. That there were rules, and that's fine for her. But but anyway, what I want to say is that as someone who so I was 36 when I burned my life down, um, but I really have so loved getting to reinvent sex for myself. Um, and reinvent sex with someone who also is inventing sex for themselves. Um, it amazes me. One thing that you pointed out, and I want to kick it over to you to talk about, is the fact that masturbation in this book is never portrayed as this sad thing you do because there's nobody else available. So will you talk a little bit about the representation of it in this book?
Yes, but then I'm coming back to you because I have a question about all of this good stuff. But yes,
Yeah.
I did love just the treatment of masturbation as something you do along. I mean, again, this is such a low bar. I mean, this is the
It's
thing
a
again.
really low bar.
Everything I loved about it was that no one else is writing this. That I mean, not no one else, but it, out there, big time. I love that masturbation was just something that you do alongside and parallel if you are having sex with someone else, maybe literally parallel to them, on like next to them, because that happens in several scenes, but also just as part of your life that is yours to have, and that isn't like you said, like a sad thing that you do only if you don't have someone else. I just love that, how she just kept um, plenty of times reminding us that that's something we have for you can have that. And but I wanted to come back to you, Molly, because I was thinking about, do you remember, did you have a moment that was like the scene you read where you were basically like walking down the moonlit streets thinking, I've I've figured it out?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, I did. Um, I did. I remember the first time I had sex with my first girlfriend, I just remember the first thought that came into my mind was there are no men here. And it felt so powerful to me. Like I felt like I mean, also this thing about like being untethered from age and femininity, I felt like untethered from the whole world. Like nobody is watching. Like nobody who there was something about like a big brother quality to it. Like there are no men here. It was an incredible feeling of tremendous freedom, even though I had been told there were rules. Um, and then also, yeah, just feel like the first. I think that for anybody who, uh, if I think that the first time, if you have only kissed men and then you kiss someone who isn't a man and whose skin is softer, it feels like mind blowing. And I definitely was like, I'm so gay now. I'm just like extremely gay. Um, anyway, which actually I don't think I am. I don't think I am. I think I'm many things. But anyway, yeah.
Okay, there is a very interesting, I'm not sure if this is realistic to tease this out here, but you said you, like there was no one watching. You
Yeah.
just realized that there was no one watching. You had this freedom. And I do think there's got to be somewhere in there some metaphor of aging and um, being seen in a different way out in the world. And like, I'll talk about the gym for a minute because I love going to the gym and lifting weights. And guess what? It's in this book, so it's totally not weird to talk about it right now. Um, but I was at the gym the other day and I came home and I was like, this is such a great gym, Tarania. This is such a great gym. I swear, no one's looking at me. And she was like, you're 47. And I was like, oh, right. True. That might be part of the reason that no one's paying attention to me in the gym. But there is a lot of freedom in that. Like for real, just walking through spaces and being like, it's kind of like the first time you walk the streets of New York City and you're like, no one cares that I'm here. It's awesome. So there's something there. Mm.
Okay, so our question for you all is how did the frankness of sexuality in this book, how did it work for you? How did it make you feel? What do you think it contributed to the book?
Did it turn you off? We know
Did it turn you
some people
on?
stopped reading it. Did it turn you on? But it might have turned you off. Also, some people didn't like that, I think. So I hear. Yes, you may.
Yes, please.
Hi. What I loved about the frankness in the book was, and I think this sort of relates to the earlier things that you were saying about perimenopause and the sort of the good that comes from it, right? Like, or the freedom that comes from that. It's that same. It is very much. If no one's looking, suddenly I realize that I've been like specifically like going about sex in a way that is a script that I inherited that I don't actually need to follow it. Like we can make sex whatever we want it to be. And part of that in my life came about because like there are changes in my body, I think, that are related to perimenopause or also to SSRIs that I was like, oh, I need to like reinvent. But there was something very freeing about that. And what I loved in the book was this like, it was just these very, very different manifestations of desire, right? And this idea of like sensuality, sexuality, like it's all sort of like the erotic is not defined by like particular sex acts. And, you know, as a mild spoiler, like the tampon scene which is really what I'm here to talk about. Like completely rewired my brain. And I was like, oh, right. Like that, the flagrant specificity, the weirdness. To me, this book was like very much, it's not like I needed permission, but it was like giving me this permission that I didn't even know I was like, that I was already sort of giving myself. And it was that feeling of like, oh, right. Like I'm going to continue down my moonlit path. Yeah.
I saw a hand over here. Yes.
Yeah, I I was just thinking about the frankness really work for me. Really, it's like my favorite thing about a person, and it's my favorite thing about her in all of her work. But also, it's really well suited to sex because sex is so much weirder than we have been led to believe. In my experience. um, and I work with people as a sex therapist as well, which, by the way, doesn't mean you have sex with people as a therapist, right? Okay. So, but we have a lot of frank talks about like, but what are you actually doing? What's actually happening? What's what's actually happening when you're doing the things you're thinking of as sex? Um, and I got so many good ideas from the book. And I just felt like the like the way that if you it was very it felt inspiring insofar as like if you have sex the same way twice, kind of that's a mistake, right? Like that's kind of the only mistake in sex is like, did you have to do it exactly that way again? Because maybe you felt that you had to actually, and like maybe there was like a little twinge in your leg that you ignored because you thought, well, that's what we did last time, so I better stay in that spot. But if you like follow the twinge in your leg, some really weird stuff starts happening. So I don't know. I'm just going on now. I'm
Tyler will bring you a mic. I'm not uncomfortable with silence, so, you know.
I don't think I want to say much, but I did want to say thank you for the quote that you shared, Katrina, because that quote just went, oh, okay, so it's okay to do it that way. And so it was really, I don't know, not remembering the other parts about masturbation, but I really did appreciate that. And thanks for sharing it. That's enough.
Here. Sorry, if no one else is going to talk, I am. Riffing off of what Angela was saying about, like, I mean, the tampon scene, but also just like the eroticism of not sex, of expanding sex beyond what is generally considered sex, and just embracing the deep bodily pleasure of things that are not sex, and speaking very, very frankly about that was, again, deeply resonated and felt very liberating. And so this book, again, felt very much like liberation through change.
It's like a real book club where the same people keep talking. But just I had some moments with this book and with her frankness, and I will say, like, also I would say shameless, right? Like she is being so honest and so frank about things that are very private and could feel very shameful, and at times I felt and I would be so uncomfortable sometimes reading the book and then just be like, I'm just going to trust it. I'm just going to trust it. Okay. She's just saying these things out loud, and now everybody knows, right? Like everybody knows that she looks weird when she masturbates, whatever the thing is. And she doesn't have any control over the narrative. She doesn't have any control over like what people are going to think about her or what they're going to say about her, and she's doing it anyway, and it felt revelatory to me, and just like how brave of her and how freeing and what a gift to the rest of us to like just put it all out there. She's like, here, and it's like, auto fiction. This is Miranda July, or and she's just like, here I am. And that for me was like, I felt this like visceral reaction oftentimes where I was like, oh, I'm so ashamed. And I was like, I don't have to be. It's not me. She's not ashamed. We're working through it together. She's like, she's giving us this gift of like, you don't have to feel ashamed. And I think it ties into the previous section of like, as you get older, you have less fucks to give. And you're like, I'm wasting my time and my energy feeling ashamed. And I can't control the narrative anyway. People are going to think whatever they're going to think about me. I can just live my life. Anyway, I felt so, I just felt really grateful. I mean, I enjoyed the book tremendously. And also I felt like this is a really brave and awesome thing that she's done.
Well, first of all, thank you for introducing the word autofiction to my vocabulary, because I maybe spent a little too much time while I was reading this book really trying to piece together what parts were true and what parts weren't. And I really probably should have just gone with the flow like you're describing. So I want to thank you for that new perspective. But I also just want to push back a little bit on that, because I think one of the things that was most powerful to me in this book is that, yes, she had no fucks to give on one hand, but on the other hand, it didn't seem like she was ready to divorce herself from like the male gaze part of the pursuit of the male gaze in any kind of way. The onset of perimenopause made her go for that even harder and become completely obsessed with trying to get the attention, especially of this much younger man. And maybe it's not until later when she is with the older woman that she kind of like maybe frees herself from that. But that tension I thought was so powerful. Like on one hand, she's like so transgressive and like doing weird things and making bad choices in terms of her marriage, right? Where she could have probably just had a frank conversation with her husband and gotten in a different path, but chose really not to. So on the one hand, she's doing all these things that are sort of questionable and whatever, but on the other hand, she's like totally free. And the tension between those two things, I felt like was one of the truest parts of the book, where you're simultaneously like going nuts and taking control of your life. I don't know if I just made any sense.
Hi. I just on the topic of frankness and sex, want to shout out Angela. I remember that you did that, wrote about sex with frankness. And it was also permission giving to read it. And this book just felt like so much permission to not just the sex, the erotic, to listen to desire. And yeah, and I want that moonlit walk so much that when I put the book down, I was looking for that freedom. And it in my life right now, it wasn't the sex and the erotic, it was the saying yes, and it was the like being a mom. I guess I want to say that too, that like she sexualizes being a mom. And I like wanted to be frank with other moms at drop off in a way that is so not sanctioned. And I felt like Miranda July would cheer for me, but I don't know that the other moms at drop off would, but I wanted it so badly. And there was this moment, and like you just get into such patterns. She describes the like tedium of patterns, right? As parents with partners, and ugh. And there was a moment with my partner and I were in that tedium of patterns. And and making a decision, and I was like, well, what if I do something different? And he was like, I guess. And I was like, I'm gonna fucking do it. Miranda July says, listen to desire. And I just love that about this book, the frankness.
What you're saying about wanting to like talk to the moms at drop off, or I think that's something that was really moving to me about the tampon scene. I mean, it was very hot. Something that was very moving to me about the tampon scene is I think for most of us, like we're alone with that experience of our bodies. Um, like I've never asked somebody else to put in my tampon. I've never asked somebody else to take out my tampon. I mean, maybe I should now. But it it's something that we're so fundamentally alone with. I think even if you have really close friends who also menstruate. And so I felt that the frankness of it, not to mention the way that she makes it sexy, but the frankness of it made me feel, it felt like such a relief. Like, ah, yes, we're all in there, like taking out our tampons. Yep. And that was really nice to to have some company in that. I didn't realize I needed it. Like I think my eyes got wet. I was like, there was never anything sexual about that in my life ever at 50, and then all of a sudden I was like, it's like an erotic.
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah.
But while I have the mic, I will say one thing. I I was just telling my friends, like, I completely did not identify with this narrator or protagonist at all. Like, I was irritated by her, like, the first couple of pages. And then I bought in 100% when she talked about, like, not being able to consummate a relationship with your child and having, like, all this raw love for them. It's, like, very, very at the very beginning of the book. And so I was like, well, let me just keep going. I'll just keep, listening to this book. And then I just bought in 100%. But the relationship with her child is what kind of drew me in as a mother of a 6-year-old. And then I like really got into the rest of it. Although I don't 100% identify with this character. I don't know anybody else feels like there's privilege and there's all this stuff that like I kind of struggling with a little bit, but the womanness of her, 100%, like that's what we have in common. Like that's the one thing that like we have together. And so I thought like I'll just keep going with this character, even though it's like, fuck, of course I'm not going to not go to New York. Like I'm going to do that. Like that's stop making these stupid decisions. What the $20,000, and you're like, okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. I got it. But anyway, yeah. Sorry. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being here.
We should check in with the bosses.
Yeah, Stasha, do we need to wrap up?
I'm here for this. Are we here for this? Yeah? I
Well-
think we have one more section that we want to talk about. Yeah.
I mean,
Let's do it.
Let's do it. If you have to leave, just quietly sneak out right there.
we won't take it personally.
Okay, Molly, you're going to read a quote. We're moving to the final. Wait, is that right? Yeah, we're moving to the final theme, which is fantasy, and you might think of it as invented fictions.
I mean, this narrator lives a lot in her daydreams, in her fantasies. She lives in them both within her own head, but also with some other characters in the book. So this section that I want to read is actually from not long after the previous section, the Audra section. This is page 217. I imagined getting up right now, slipping out the front door and finding that all the women in the neighborhood were also leaving their houses. We were all running to the same field, a place we hadn't discussed but implicitly knew we would meet in when the tipping point tipped. We ran like horses, but we weren't horses. So after the initial hugs, there wasn't anything to do there in the grass. This book is so funny. Everyone started checking their phones to see if their partners were calling, and they weren't. Not yet. We hadn't been gone long enough. Soon it was just a million women waiting for their mates to call, to be needed, and then to fall into panic and guilt, to be torn, which was our primary state. Start the revolution here, now, in this field? Or drive home and slip back into the fold, use the electric toothbrush, feel grim and trapped? Of course, there was no decision to make because we were all already home, not in a field. There was no collective tipping point. Most of us wouldn't do anything very different, ever. Our yearning and quiet rage would be suppressed and seep into our children, and they would hate this about us enough to do it a new way. That was how most change happened, not within one lifetime, but between generations. If you really want to change, you had to believe that you were both yourself and your baby. You had to let yourself be completely reborn within one life. Of course, the danger was in risking everything, destroying everything for nothing.
Wow. I don't even know if that quote is about fantasy.
I know, I was reading it and I was
Actually,
like, this
what?
is too real.
But listen, this is what it made me think of right off the bat. In another conversation that you and I had, we talked about parenthood, and you've mentioned tonight already blowing up your life. Okay, and I think that in our conversation, I'm just going to tell everyone what our conversation was, because obviously that's okay in this particular case. But you talked a little bit about how your child helped you do that, how being a parent, and bear with me here. I'm curious specifically about if you really want to change, you had to believe that you were both yourself and your baby. You had to let yourself be completely reborn within one life. Like, was that what that's about?
Oh, I love that you, wow, okay. This is so interesting because actually the other night, so on Tuesday night, I spent election night. My spouse and I had a couple of friends over who are both midwives, and we spent the evening talking about this book. And one of them challenged me on this. So I have some like new thoughts about it. But what I had said to you was that I felt very acutely that I could not stay in my marriage, or at least I couldn't stay in my marriage as it was. I had to, we had to open our marriage, and then ultimately we had to end our marriage because I wanted to be someone who I could be proud of. But the way that I thought of that at the time was I wanted to be someone my daughter could be proud of. And my friend the other night challenged me and was like, but do you really think if you had asked your daughter, like, that was what she would have wanted you to do? And no, I don't. I mean, I don't. Um, I don't like that my daughter goes back and forth between two houses, and I know she doesn't either.
It sounds very feminist, though. I mean, to be
But-
like, I'm blowing up my life.
I think in the short term,
It's real. It's still true.
I think in the short term, I made her life harder, and I don't think that it was what she would have wanted me to do. Which is different from would she be
Kids
proud of
don't
me?
know what they want.
But I think that it was a certain.
I mean,
but it's true. She has
how
no
old was
idea.
she? Doesn't
No, at
was
the
she was
time,
six?
at the time she was 3.
Okay, so right. So it's like I see your friend's point, and it's like when your daughter looks back,
Yes.
when she is at midlife.
And in that sense, what I was doing was this kind of mental gymnastics that was in a certain way a fantasy. Like I was fantasizing about how I wanted to be seen by my child, who is also the person who, well, I think we all have complicated relationships with our parents, but I wanted this thing. I wanted to feel sure that I had done what I could feel proud of, and I hoped she would too. So, I don't know.
Thanks for going down that direction for a moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's too much of a quick pivot back to fantasy, but I was just thinking about what you said about being annoyed with the protagonist a little bit, and when it comes to fantasy and how much is in this book and how much the protagonist is living in her own head constantly, I did find myself getting a little annoyed. I was like, geez, okay, it's so selfish. Like, God, like pay attention to the people who are around you. You can't just live in a fantasy world all the time. that the Lego scene with Sam where they're like, I look at what I made, and she's like, I can't, it's so blocky. um, I was sort of like, that's awful. And then, I mean, I have done that a million times with my own children because it's incredibly boring to be a parent, first of all, let's be honest. And I do like Legos, but there's so many things that are boring about kids talking to you about things. Like, and especially when they're in that age range, I believe, sixes, sevens, no. Um, and but then I was like, oh my gosh, literally when it comes to me and my working mind, I was making Kale, who's our 16-year-old, eggs the other morning, and I was like literally like talking with him about how perfect the eggs were, and he was arguing back, and I was like, actually, they're pretty perfect. And there was a line down my brain, and over here I was thinking about my workday, who I was going to talk to, what I was going to do. It was a full conversation, like completely both conversations happening at the same time, which is pretty cool that you can do that. Like, whoa. But also exactly what she's doing somewhat, except arguably her creative mind is extremely creative, and my running down the schedule of my workday was like not as exciting. But anyway, I was just thinking about how that fantasy life versus the sort of brain that we have that's on and doing internal things all the time, and how are those different or the same?
Yeah. So we wanted to open up the question to you. I mean, the most basic question is like, to what degree is fantasy a part of your life? And I think you can tell we don't mean like sexual fantasy, or not purely, but this narrator uses fantasy ultimately as a way, like these ideas that start inside her head become transformative, right? It's like fantasy is a way that she uses to transform her life. So I'm interested in, to what degree is fantasy a part of your life?
We save this one till the end because it's the hardest one. Probably.
Up here.
I don't, this might be a little stream of thought because it is the harder question. But when like thinking about parenthood and being in two brains or places at the same time, and so when what was the other word you used besides fantasy? Fiction?
Invented fiction?
Invented fiction. I think about that a lot when I'm with my kid who's 20 months old, and I'm living in this present tense moment with them, but also going back and forward in time. Like time gets really weird in that motherhood period that I'm in, and I don't know what it's going to be like in the future. And so I also think about, and there's so much grief for me in parenthood where things are changing, and kind of what you were talking about earlier, what we gain and lose in midlife, what we can gain or what we're losing. And for me, so I have to grieve her growing up, but I also, all of a sudden, like when she started wanting to read books and scooting back and sitting in my lap, I was like, oh, I've arrived at this thing that I fantasized about for so long. So I don't know. I guess to me, those questions make me think a lot about time and space. And then sometimes when you arrive in this moment, you realize you've been waiting for a long time. So that's what I think about.
Oh, thank you. Somebody around here?
Yes, right there.
Okay, so I've been sort of thinking about this a lot recently outside of, I didn't read the book. Sorry, I have it. It's on my nightstand. But as I've approached midlife now, one thing I've started to notice is that like I've started to assess the way that I interact with fantasy a lot more than I did before. So my theory is that that has to do with arriving at a certain age where the future doesn't seem quite so impossibly far away. The future is like kind of now. And so my relationship with fantasy has changed a ton because I'm, it's not that I'm fantasizing less, but it's more like I'm fantasizing in ways that are less about who I will be someday and more about who I can be right this second. And so that's actually like engaging me with the world more, but also it's fantasy, if that makes sense. So I'm still grappling with it, so I don't really know how to describe it any better than that.
Yeah, I want to just kind of like take what you're saying and go with that a little bit too, because I feel like what the hallmark of middle age for me has been arriving at a place where my fantasies have ended. Like the fantasy I had for my life as a child was like, she'll do this and this and this and this and this and it's be children, and then she will raise her children, and then they will get to a certain age, and then no more fantasy. And so middle age to me, and I felt this in the book too, but it's just like coming against this, like, oh, the picture, there's no more picture. I never thought past this. So am I to create a new fantasy now for the next half? Or is that not the way at all? Is it just meant to be like one step in the dark all the way through? So where I'm at with it.
Wow. Oh, I love all of this.
Okay, now we're just gonna have a little, just you and me. Okay, so you totally just embodied what I've been thinking about too, because same thing, like all these fantasies I had when I was growing up about what I would be, and some of those died. Some of those did not, because also I mean, like I think I thought I was gonna be 500 things, so you can't have them all. But yeah, the just sort of like moving through that and sort of like the way that fantasy is supposed to be yours, right? But a lot of times it's about how you want to be perceived. And so the other cool thing about becoming this age is that you sort of become more invisible and more invisible and more invisible. So your fantasies stop being quite so much about how other people perceive you and they are more about how you want to perceive you, or at least, sorry, me.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm 37 and have
37 too.
look at that. Look at that. Um, um, and so yeah, I sort of read this book and it like opened a little bit of a like peek behind the curtain of like, ooh, what's happening in like 5 to 15 years. And it was so thrilling. And this was the first time in my life that it was like, oh, it's gonna be thrilling actually to keep aging. And with the fantasy piece, I thought about time. Someone was talking about time earlier, and the thing that felt most thrilling to me, besides the frankness and the eroticism and all the things we talked about, is just the spaciousness of time for the narrator. And just like there were times I was reading this book, like, do you have to like go do something or? I was just, and I was so I mean, yeah, and there's privilege in that, and there was some stuff in there that was sort of unsaid. There was like no friction with her child and stuff that I want to unpack separately. But I also think that it was so like beautiful to see what that spaciousness of time led to. And I'm in a moment in my life where I just feel, you know, no spaciousness of time, and like my body is occupied by my children, um and so it both made me feel like, okay, this is, this is not static. Like there will be a time when there will be more spaciousness, in a way that just like brought more ease to this moment in my life, and also sort of gave me permission to say, no, I'm gonna like wrestle back those moments of letting myself just zone out and think about, like dream about what I'm gonna make for dinner tonight, and that's gonna be my little fantasy of the day. even when I'm supposed to be doing something else. And so those were two little like glimmers of fantasy that I took away.
I think we have time for maybe two more. Is that two more? We've got one here.
It was interesting for me listening to the conversation that up there about the fantasies kind of starting, because I feel like at midlife, my fantasies have finally really flourished. And because I was on such a path of getting having a career and children and the house or this or that, and now suddenly I've arrived, and suddenly I have all these fantasies that I finally have time to have and space to have. And I think I've battled with guilt of having all these fantasies, because do they take you out of the present moment or take away from what you do have? And so it was just a different way of just being at a similar place, but having such a different experience.
Any final thoughts from that half of the group? Oh, Tyler, right below you there.
I think I'm so appreciative of all of these perspectives and conversations we've had, and thinking about the not having the expansiveness of time because of the stage of life that I'm in. I find that my fantasies are more banal, but they're like granular and simple and beautiful in that. It's like, I'm going to think about whatever, some food that it might come to fruition or might not, and that's the beauty of it. But I think the condensing of time to not having a lot has created fantasies that are much narrower as well, and that doesn't mean that to me, there's no judgment on that. So.
Thank you so much. I was really a little bit nervous about tonight. Like I said, I've never done a book club before. This is a book club, obviously, and this was really fun and really cool. So thank you so much. Angela said at the outset that Molly and I couldn't do anything wrong, that it was all right, whatever we did. And so what we'd like to do now, we just discussed it. We want to actually give it back to Angela for a couple of closing words. A little something to close us out, will ya? Okay.
Okay, well, so first I want to say a thing that I've been sitting there for like over an hour worrying about, which is that Molly wrote a third memoir, and it's called The Fixed Stars, about a lot of the things that she talked about, and somehow I left that out when I was talking. So it is over here and available for purchase. Okay. I just on a personal note, like people who have spoken, like there's someone who was like started off as my barista like 15 years ago and who is like a dear friend. There's someone who I know like who has a year-old baby, but like also does a nanny share with another great person. There's someone who I taught a writing workshop with who I know came from Tacoma. Guys, my high school best friend is here. She's from Portland and she just happens to be here. But so also, Putsada Rang, who is here. You think I don't see you. Put is going to be here on December 12th with Giles, who's a very cool, just one name, Giles. She's a very cool orca whale researcher, and a poet named Laura Day, and they're going to be talking about postmenopausal orcas and what we might learn about sensuality, sexuality, from nature, and maybe there's more out there and we don't have to follow human models of what midlife looks like. So I'm just plugging the last event of the series. But really, I just want to say thank you to Katrina and Molly. I was like, you guys can do whatever you want. This was my fantasy, to have a book group like this. And we didn't really know how it was going to happen, so you guys made it happen. And all of you made my fantasy come true. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.